And on behalf of the Income Tax Department, I extend to you, sir, a warm welcome, uh, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, and also I felicitate other distinguished guests who have joined us today. At the outset, I take this opportunity to underline the changing role of the department in today's perspective, and therefore the need to reorient ourselves to the changing needs of taxpayers and the tax administrators. The importance of developing skills, specifically the soft skills to meet the changing expectations of the stakeholders. Training and skill development has always been an integral part of the department's working, as it should be for any organization that aspires to be a learning organization, proud to be continuously reskilling and reorienting itself to the evolving needs of all stakeholders. The training arms of the departments are both the National Academy of Direct Taxes and the Direct Tax Regional Training Institutes all over India. They have been conducting courses and imparting training to our officers and staff on various aspects of the tax administration, mainly the technical part. But they also do the training at the soft skill part also, as we'll be hearing from NADT and the RTI. These courses are designed to upgrade the knowledge base and the skill sets in line with the changes that have been brought from time to time under various administration and the various legislative framework. Over the years, empirical research as well as anecdotal experiences, they have established that soft skills do play a very important part in the success of an organization and the satisfaction levels of its employees and the service recipients alike. Recognizing the importance of soft skills, the NADT has been conducting courses, I am told, aimed at developing soft skills across cadres in the department. However, with the transformational changes recently introduced in the functioning and approach of the department, of which you will be hearing more and more, the role of training in soft skills has acquired even more salience. In recent past, the department has re-engineered its various processes with the aim of enhancing taxpayer convenience and imparting greater transparency to its working. The department now sees itself as an enabler, as it should, and as a service provider, focused on the taxpayers' needs and convenience. The entire gamut of the functioning of the department is driven towards honoring the honest, an initiative undertaken to mark a reorientation of the department's role and functioning. The interface of the taxpayer is now trust-based, technology-enabled, and purely taxpayer-centric. Organizational change has its own attendant challenges. At the level of procedures and processes, it's about retraining and reskilling the workforce in the new processes and structural framework, as also new tools and technologies supporting them. Ultimately, however, it is the human resource that drives any change. It is the human resource that are at the fulcrum of any initiative as transformational as this. And it is here that the need for reskilling and upskilling the human resources in terms of management, leadership, and specifically the soft skill. Human resources of the department need to be prepared for adjusting to this new evolving ecosystem, not only at the attitudinal level for the service-oriented approach, but also in form of other intangibles like values and ethics, team building and leadership, innovation, collaboration, and finally, the resilience of character. I am informed that this webinar focuses on these very areas. Webinar will enable the officers at the senior level to discuss and be exposed to the current thinking and the best practices in these areas and how to harness these insights in the service of the successful implementation of the new initiative undertaken by the department. I hope that the participating officers will find this webinar useful and will enhance their effectiveness the discharge of their leadership roles, wherever they are. With these remarks, I congratulate the NADT, led by Nitin Gupta, Principal DG NADT, for having organized this webinar, and once again extend my heartiest welcome to Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, to this webinar. Thank you.
Now I request our Director General, Shri Nitin Gupta, to kindly welcome Shri Rajiv Kumar sir, and request him to kindly address the participant. So,
thanks, Arvind. It's a matter of great pride and honor in welcoming Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, to this All India webinar on management and soft skills with a specific focus on transformational leadership for the senior officers of the Income Tax Department. Sir, we are all overjoyed to have you with us at this moment. We all are aware of the profile of Honorable Dr. Rajiv Kumar sir, but for the benefit of the participants to this webinar, it is appropriate to give a brief introduction about him. Sir is the Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog and an important constituent for shaping the policy of the government. He also serves as the Chancellor of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Pune. Dr. Rajiv Kumar sir holds a PhD in Economics from Lucknow University and a DPhil from Oxford University, United Kingdom. His earlier stint in the government has been with the Ministry of Industry and subsequently in the Ministry of Finance as Economic Advisor. Sir has also served as Independent Director in the Central Boards of the Reserve Bank of India and State Bank of India. Dr. Rajiv Kumar sir has wide experience of having worked in the government, academia, and industry associations, as well as the international finance institutions. Sir has authored several books on India's economy and national security. Few of his latest books are Modi and His Challenges in 2016, Resurgent India, Ideas and Priorities in 2015, and Exploding Aspirations, Unlocking India's Future in 2014. Sir is a leading speaker on issues in Indian political economy. Some of the remarks which Sir has made brings out his thoughts on the recent occurrences concerning India. Like Sir has once quoted that a very large segment of our population deals in agriculture and agriculture sector has not suffered due to COVID-19. Agriculture has continued to retain its growth. It was also declared as an essential service right from the beginning, and this is often overlooked by those who talk about rising inequality and rising destitution, etc. Sir has pro-poor approach and has been at the helm of devising the policies for the future of our country. With these small remarks, I will not come in between the participants and the Honorable Dr. Rajiv Kumar, and I would like to invite him on the electronic dais and request him to deliver his inaugural address to the eager participants of this two-day course. Sir.
Good morning, everybody. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Chairman CBDT, Mr. Mohapatra, Principal Director General NADT, Mr. Nitin Gupta, all the other officials, senior officials, ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's really indeed an honor for me to be invited to speak to you, to connect with you. And actually, it brings back very long memories, not only of having been to Nagpur once, but I believe this is from, you are in Lucknow and have been there, and that's my hometown. But also my very long memories of having been in the Ministry of Finance from 1991 to 1995 beginning, the period which saw a lot of changes. As you said, I was the economic advisor during that time. And one of the things that we had to do, if you remember, was to bring about significant changes in the tax structure of the country. And that's the time at which lots of things were done. SEBI was formed, the Bank Narasimhan Committee report was undertaken, and the tariffs were reduced. Direct tax structure was also sort of simplified. And I remember the time, and I worked actually too. I was very lucky that during that time, but also I think there were probably at least 4 chairmen of CBDT who I had a chance to work with. I think Mr. Swaminathan, Mr. A.K. Ghosh, Mr. S. Ramamurthy, and Mr. R.S. Rathore, the people whom I interacted directly with, and also there used to be a colleague of mine, a director, sort of working with me, Mrs. Roy, I remember, and she was the one who gave me a lot of insights into the working of the board. I think I remember Mr. Roy, I think, who is the member policy, I think, at that time, a tall gentleman. So really took me really back to when I was interacting much more deeply with the department, and I hope that I will get further chance and occasion through Niti Aayog to work together to bring about some more essential reforms that are required even now going forward, that we will come to. Ladies and gentlemen, before I start off on talking about, by the way, I must first congratulate you on choosing just the right topic, which is the soft skills and for the training, because I think that's something which is the value of which is very often underestimated. And I've noticed in my last 4 years in Niti Aayog that that's probably the most important skill to have, to create teams within the government, to create a common purpose within the government, to have, to be able to break the hierarchies which we are very often used to, and create an atmosphere and an environment where all of us can work together and contribute to the very best. In Niti Aayog, we have been very fortunate that the Prime Minister has permitted us to hire laterally, so that we have a wonderful mixture now of domain specialists, young people, and government officials all working together. And that's required, in some sense, a multicultural effort, and where soft skills, as you can imagine, have been most important. And just to carry on with the Niti Aayog thing, I don't know how many of you are by now even aware of, it's a new kid on the block. It's a new organization created in 2015 after the Prime Minister announced on the August 15th speech that the Planning Commission was being closed. So let me just spend a few minutes on explaining what Niti Aayog is and what Niti Aayog mandate is. I hope you would find it interesting to get these insights. The first thing I want to say is that Niti Aayog is not a successor to the Planning Commission. In no way is it a successor to the Planning Commission. We don't do central planning. We don't do 5-year plans. We don't do any development finance devolution to the states, which unfortunately had become the principal function of the Planning Commission towards the latter years, to the point that even Dr. Manmohan Singh, as the Prime Minister, had started the conversation on transforming the Planning Commission after all these years, especially after 1991, with the growth of the private sector, the importance of the investment, private investment, etc. So I think it was a natural shift from being a central planner and being the agency in charge of devolving funds to the states, to becoming the principal think tank of the country. And that's the only capital we have, that's the only leverage we have, which is our intellectual capital, and which is what we bring to bear on our relationship with other ministries and other states. Now, we work across all the ministries, we work with them, and the idea is that we develop new ideas, which we collect from experts and societies and everything else. We nurture them, we shape them, and then we put them back into the line ministries for their implementation. I think the best example would be Ayushman Bharat, which was developed here which was nurtured here, which took shape here, and after having taken shape, it was passed on to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, who then created, the National Health Authority, which is now responsible for this very major, program, which has taken the attention of the world as providing health insurance to 500 million people across in our country. Now, similarly, we have done work on higher education, on school education, and I can go on, but that's the thought, that we will develop these ideas, we will bring them to a shape that can be implemented, and then pass them on, and then work together with the ministries to make them happen, as it were. So in that sense, we are not just a think tank, we are an action tank. The second part of this is our work with the states, with whom we have now become development partners. And in that sense, what we do is that we promote both cooperative federalism and competitive federalism. By cooperative federalism is that we work with every state, and each of my member and I have responsibility and developing region. The other aspect is, I think, even more important or equally important, which is And also there is no doubt in my mind at least that the tax department, the tax administration, and especially the direct tax administration is probably the most critical department and agency of any government anywhere in the world. Because it is the basis, it is the foundation of the social contract that we have between the government and the public, the citizenry, the citizens. Because without such revenue collection, without the resources at the command of the government, which are done through the tax administration, there is no way that the government can provide the services and the mandate that it is supposed to provide in any democracy, whether it is security, internal and external, or or social services or public infrastructure. Nothing can be done. So I think you are the bloodstream. You represent, in some sense, the bloodstream of this system that we call as our democracy, as our economy. So I therefore really, I really sort of congratulate you, and also sort of want to emphasize the importance of the work that you're doing in this regard. And I think therefore it is very good to see that between 1991 to 2019, the share of direct taxes has more than doubled in the gross tax revenue, from 22% to I think now more than 50% you've come. This is a very progressive trend, because indirect taxes, as we know, are regressive. The direct taxes are progressive, and I think this trend will continue as we go forward. And the trend of declining customs revenues and indirect taxes, I think, will also continue, and that's a very good. That's very good that we. That's a good trend that we have. So, as I said, a lot more has been achieved. The number of taxpayers was about maybe about 3 crores when I was in the Ministry of Finance. 33 million, if I'm not wrong, and now it's about 6.2 crore. And maybe it's even gone up to 7, because this data is 2019. Now that's a huge achievement. That to have more than doubled, the number of, the number of the taxpayer, the tax net, the broadening, the widening of the tax net. We've got now faceless assessment, faceless appeals, the taxpayer charter, and the digital returns. And I am so pleasantly surprised to receive them on my laptop, that I don't owe any more as my tax, or that I get a reimbursement directly into the bank. I mean, these are achievements to be proud of. The number of scrutiny, the cases under scrutiny, has also declined from almost 1%, 0.96% to 0.24%. Now that's again a proof of how far the department has moved. And I think the limits for appeals have been hiked upwards to minimize litigation, and the revenues tied up in litigation, and the randomly generated assessment, etc. I think are all very big strides that the department has taken over the last 30 years. And I think therefore we must again we need to build on this wonderful achievement that we already have, and therefore in that spirit, I would like to point out some other factors in the spirit of what all we have to do yet to go where we want to go. And one of the things, of course, is that the tax to GDP ratio is in our country at 8%, I think, 8.2%, while the world average is about 15%. And even within our peer countries, I think it's about 11 or 12. Now, this is the central government, I realize that, and therefore you've got the state governments, etc., to add on to it. But nonetheless, the tax to GDP ratio could do with improvement, because Scandinavia, because in Scandinavia, it's almost 50% of the GDP. Now, in this case, I think there is the direct tax was only 1.8% of GDP in 1991. It peaked at 6% in 2018, but it's declined to 5% in the budget estimate for 2022. Now, I think this decline of the percent of GDP needs to be reversed, and we'll go into how this can be achieved, and how skilling and soft skills are important in doing that. The second thing, I don't know if you noticed this, but our exemption limits in the country are about 160% of per capita incomes, and so that we really do let go of many people who are way above, nearly twice, 3 times the level of our per capita income. In other countries, for example, in the UK, it's 16% of the per capita income. In Brazil, it's 4%. In Germany, it's 26%. So that's where, most countries, the exemption limits are below the per capita average that we've got. In our case, we are, as I said, we are 200%, almost 160% above. Now, this is something that should come from the direct tax, from the department to the notice of the government. That are we, because also, as you notice, about 12% of our taxes are collected from people who pay who have an income of 2.5 to about, I think, 3.5 or 4 lakh crore, which account for about 25% of tax returns filed in our country. So they do. So at that level, there's something that is to be thought about how we, how we improve our data, our tax net even further. Now, just one other thought for you. We have about 25 crore households in the country. Of these, 50% are in agriculture. Let's assume. Some people would say 40, some people would say 50. They are out of the tax net. That's clearly so, because that's our law. Right or wrong is not for me to comment. And then, so that reduces our taxable base immediately 12.5 crore households. And then out of these 12.5 crores, let's say that 30% or 4 crore are below the poverty line. So that leaves us with about 8.5 crore, which constitute, in my view, at least the tax net that we've got. Out of these, we know that about 6.4 file a tax return, out of which I think nearly about 15% file nil returns. But nonetheless, 6.4 crore file the tax returns. So we still have about 20 million households, 2 crore households, who should be in the tax net and are not in the tax net. Now, this is where I think we need to, because I'm saying we've already taken away 30% who are below the poverty line, and they are, of course, below the national average. This reinforces my point of saying that we need to make, I think the Nobel laureate, Mr. Abhijit Banerjee, and Dilip Mukherjee, who is a professor at Boston, they have commented on the fact that very often our revenue, tax, and other policies pander to the middle class rather than look after and focus on the improvement and welfare of what Francois Bourgogne, the chief economist of the World Bank, talked about, the lowest decile of the population. So if we decided to improve the welfare and level of living of the lowest decile of the population, then perhaps these 2 crore would also be in the tax net to give us more revenues to be spent on those who are at the bottom of the pyramid or who are at the end of the queue, which is the philosophy of the Antyodaya of late Mr. Deen Dayal Upadhyay. So I think this is something that we need to think through, and I think I hope there will be some discussion on this as we go forward. But in order to improve our tax net, in order to improve our efficiency, in order to also have better compliance, which is already improving, but even better, I think the 2 principal requirements are building trust between the tax department and the people and the taxpayers, and improving the credibility of government's finances, improving the credibility of government finances. Let me talk about the second issue first. Every taxpayer does not fail to point out the famous statement by by Shri Rajiv Gandhi that only 10 or is it 15% of the actual expenditure reaches the true beneficiary, and the rest just gets frittered away in layers of intermediaries and intermediation. And as a result of which the taxpayer says that, look, why am I paying these taxes if I don't get the benefit of that? And that's the core, as it were, of building credibility between the administration or the requirement and the taxpayer. Now, I think this has changed a lot, And this is, in the last 7 years, a great deal has been done to improve the delivery of service, improve the last mile delivery, to make sure that all our programs like the Ujjwala or the Saubhagya or the Swachh Bharat or Ayushman Bharat, etc., have all worked. But I put it to you is that we still need a lot more improvement in governance and efficiency of our expenditure to be able to build that trust, to be able to improve, to be able to get the credibility by which the taxpayer will be happily, in some sense, would not see it as a burden, but would see it as a contribution, and to the national cause by doing so. So that's the first thing. The second part of building this credibility concerns discretionary behavior, sometimes by the revenue authorities and the revenue mechanism, for very different reasons and driven by very varied stakeholders and reasons. There is undoubtedly discretionary behavior vis-a-vis the taxpayers. And I think this needs to change, and we can discuss it further, and how to improve that. But it goes to the very heart of our political economy. This question of changing, of moving away from discretionary behavior to principle-bound behavior of the tax authorities goes to the very heart of the nature of our political economy, the nature of our democracy, the relation between the corporate world and our political and bureaucratic establishment. And one of these days, I hope we will get together to discuss this more thoroughly and, of course, and confidentially as to what can be done to change this as we go forward, because without this, you may not get as much efficiency and as much bang for the buck as we want to have. The second issue that I wanted to, as I said, is to talk about trust and its importance as a soft skill. And I think this is, for me, critical, because for too long a time, for very long now, we seem to have had built up an adversarial relationship between the government and business in our country. Some kind of an adversarial relationship has been built up. And I think this is where I think it needs to change. For a long time, again, profit making has not been seen kindly. I'm talking in general terms, a lot of us are quite suspicious of those who make money and assume that it must have been, and already assume that if you're making money in the country, you could not have done it in an honest manner and with integrity. This needs to change urgently and dramatically so that we can bring back, and I say this because we know, you know, and I know, that there is now a strong exodus of our potential taxpayers into other jurisdictions. And some people count a figure of about 100,000 new registrations in jurisdictions like Dubai and Singapore of our entrepreneurs, of our individual entrepreneurs. We need to bring that back. We need to reverse that flow to attract them back to our jurisdiction as possible. And and I was quite amazed to see the data that those who pay taxes of above 100 crore, 105, I think constitute about 0.19% of the total taxpayers, and they contribute as much as 7.2% of the total direct tax revenue. And if you look at them, this is the corporate tax I'm talking about, the corporate, and if you actually go down, you see that these are only 1,600 companies that are there. Now, I remember the time when I was in the Ministry of Finance that there was a proposal to set up a large taxpayers unit, where the thought was that this will be, and I think the original proposal came from Mr. Chidambaram at that time, and the idea was that we will set up places where the large taxpayer can come and will be treated, and there'll be a kind of a rapport and relationship that will help to create that. Now, I don't know what's happened to that, but the point is that we need to ensure that our corporates feel welcome, as it were, because they are the largest contributors to our tax effort, to our revenue effort. And I think this needs to, we have to, the trust between the corporates, between the citizens, and between the government, that all of us are surely on the same side of the effort to build our national economy, are on the same side for serving the national cause. I think this needs to be achieved as we go forward. I don't know what the methods for that is, but I leave it to your discussion as to how that will be achieved. But time has come now to surely, as the Honorable Prime Minister said in the Parliament itself, to recognize the value of those who generate wealth, who generate employment, and who contribute to the economy. For me, this does not for a moment, not for even one moment, it does not imply any compromise with our given legal framework and our own fiscal requirements. That's not the point. And what we need is to ensure that there is a taxpayer's integrity and their expected contribution to the economy and society continues to happen as it should happen. However, it does imply a change in our perception of the taxpayers, especially the large taxpayers, as being, as being inherently either dishonest or exploitative or oppressive, to a perception that these are the people who are contributing more, or at least a similar level of value addition to our society, and without whose contributions, in fact, will not be able to deliver the government's promise to its citizens, which is the basis of the social contract that I talked about. So to repeat myself and to emphasize a point, from seeing the taxpayer as a basket of rotten apples where there are a few good ones, we need to change this to saying that this is a basket of good apples and a few rotten ones that we should go after, penalize and act against in an exemplary manner so that good behavior becomes the norm. I don't know whether you know that I was the chief economist also of the CII and the Secretary General of FICCI. And in both those organizations, I had said that the onus for this also lies on the corporate world, because they should have a set of self-regulation whereby, for example, membership can be denied to those who have been seen to have not worked in the manner that they're expected to do, and who have seen to have evaded taxes. And I know the difference between evasion and avoidance, but at least there has to be a self-regulation, beginning of a self-regulation within the corporate world and also within the ordinary taxpayer. And I think this is one of the skills that the department might need to generate, to develop, as to how to connect with the corporate world and the citizen, that paying your taxes honestly becomes a national movement, becomes a national cause. If you go to North Europe, you will find this happening. If you go to Japan, you will find that this is the norm. Everybody thinks that paying your contribution, paying your genuine taxes, that we require, is contributing your bit and returning to the society that you owe to the society. And I think this is where I'm not sure how this will. I don't have the details of this, but I do submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the time has come now to make the tax system, the tax administration, a part of the national movement, to be seen as some people who are doing the country's biggest job, the most important job, and for us to be able to put forward a set of messages which will bring about the necessary behavioral change in the society. And you know that the science of behavioral and social change is now the most important one. The nudge unit has been formed in Niti Aayog, which is trying to take forward this process of how to change behavior, without which neither will we will not be able to achieve most of our objectives that we've got. So I hope this is for, to close, I would just say that we have the job of making the payment of tax as a trust-based business, where both sides know that they are serving the same purpose, and with the knowledge and fully internalized knowledge that all the taxpayers' revenues are being spent most efficiently, most effectively, most transparently, and with the clear governance that the Prime Minister often talked about. So I think, and also that those who do not do what they're supposed to do receive the retribution swiftly and in full measure. So, ladies and gentlemen, this will lead to a transformation. and Niti Aayog stands for is the National Institute of Transforming. I think this transformation is now required. And once we achieve this transformation, I have no hesitation in saying that we will become a welfare society where those at the bottom of the pyramid will recognize that this government is working for them, for improving the lot of the last decile of the population, because that is what Antyodaya is all about. Thank you for listening to me and giving me this opportunity. Jai Hind.